The conference room door swung open with that heavy, deliberate click you only hear in places where power changes hands. I stood there at the far end of the polished oak table, the morning light from the Chicago skyline slicing through the blinds in sharp lines across my face. The new vice president of operations, Elena Vargas, didn't bother to look up from her tablet at first. Her voice came out cool and measured, the kind of tone people use when they've rehearsed the script in the mirror that morning. Security will escort you from the building. Hand over your badge and any company property. This meeting is over. She said it without inflection, like announcing the weather. No eye contact. No acknowledgement of the 4 years I'd spent building the very frameworks that kept this firm compliant with SEC filings, FDIC oversight, and every continuity requirement that let us touch client funds across state lines. I had drafted the protocols myself after the last merger scare nearly triggered an audit cascade. Half our regulatory submissions still carried my name as the designated continuity liaison. But none of that mattered to her on day one. She was fresh from a smaller fintech outfit in Austin that had imploded under cost-cutting measures she championed. Shiny resume, aggressive vision, and a room full of new hires nodding along. This was her statement piece. Clear out the old guard to signal change. 2 security officers stepped forward in sync, one with his hand resting near his radio, the other reaching tentatively toward my elbow. The air in the room felt thicker, the kind of charged silence that precedes a storm. I didn't flinch or argue. Instead, I reached into my blazer pocket, fingers brushing the worn leather edges of the badge holder. The chip inside had seen better days. Edges softened from thousands of swipes through turnstiles and server rooms. I placed it face down on the table with a soft thud that echoed louder than it should have. The lead guard flipped it over to scan. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly, eyes darting from the badge to Vargas. Then back. "Ma'am," he said, voice low and careful. "This identification is linked directly to our key person designation under the Operational Continuity Charter. Deactivation without formal reassignment would violate sections covering access validation, encryption handoff, and reporting integrity." Vargas's brow furrowed for the first time, a tiny crack in the composure. She waved a dismissive hand toward the door. "We'll handle the paperwork later. Proceed." He didn't push further, but the hesitation lingered in his posture. I nodded once to both guards, a small gesture of respect that made them exchange uneasy glances. Their confidence from 2 minutes earlier had evaporated. Turning on my heel, I walked out, shoes clicking against the marble floors in measured rhythm. No one trailed behind me down the long hallway past the executive wing, where plaques still bore my name: Lead Architect for Regulatory Continuity, Continuity Officer of Record. Titles that sounded ceremonial until you understood they were anchors. The November wind off Lake Michigan bit hard as I pushed through the revolving doors into the parking garage. Gray skies pressed down, frost rimming the edges of my car's windshield. I slid into the driver's seat of my reliable sedan, gripping the wheel until my knuckles whitened. The silence inside the car was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the engine starting. In the glove compartment waited a slim flash drive etched with contingency protocol archive. Not a weapon. Not revenge. Simply the safeguards I had engineered when the board first asked me to future-proof the firm against leadership turnover. As I merged onto Lakeshore Drive, the city unfolding in its winter starkness, the weight settled in my chest, not anger, but a profound stillness. People like Vargas saw badges as symbols, plastic and replaceable. They never paused to consider the cryptographic bindings underneath, the living validations required by federal charter. My badge wasn't just entry. It was the heartbeat confirming active key person accountability every 7 minutes across distributed systems. When that ping ceased at precisely 8:14 a.m., silent timers across multiple jurisdictions began their countdown. 2 hours. That's all the window allowed before automated protocols classified operations as non-compliant and shifted to protected escrow mode. No dramatic shutdowns or alerts blaring through speakers. Just methodical, legally mandated pauses that prevented further exposure. I had written it that way after a prior incident where unchecked shortcuts nearly cost us 7 figures in penalties. The board had praised the fix but never dug into the details. So I stopped explaining and started embedding. The drive home to my quiet apartment in Lincoln Park gave me time to replay the scene. The way the guard's warning had hung unfinished. The subtle shift in room dynamics. Funny how silence can carry more threat than shouting. By the time I parked and stepped inside, the clock read just past 9. I brewed coffee, black and strong, and sat at my kitchen table staring at the flash drive. The system wasn't mine to control anymore. It belonged to the architecture now, enforcing what human oversight had failed to respect. Back when I first joined Midwest Secure Finance 4 years earlier, the firm was riding high on post-pandemic digital banking growth. We handled everything from payment processing to wealth management platforms, always skating the edge of regulatory scrutiny. I started as a mid-level analyst but quickly rose because I saw patterns others missed, the small policy drifts that accumulated into vulnerabilities. During one late-night integration after acquiring a regional lender, a junior developer bypassed a validation layer to meet a deadline. It triggered a near miss with the CFPB, forcing emergency remediation that cost weeks and eroded trust internally. That's when the board empowered me to draft the Enhanced Continuity Enforcement Framework. It took 3 grueling months of negotiations with IT, legal, and finance leads. The finance VP at the time pushed hard for streamlined credentials, arguing speed trumped caution. I held firm, citing real-world cases where similar oversights had led to massive fines. After he departed following his own costly error, the room listened more carefully. Clause equivalents to what became our core safeguard, let's call it the anchor protocol, weren't flashy. No flashy dashboards or automated emails flooding inboxes. It operated quietly in the background, periodic heartbeat checks tied to a hardware-rooted certificate bound exclusively to one active key person. Me. At the time of deployment. Approved by external auditors. Notarized. And hard-coded into the operational schema with no easy overrides or duplicates. The idea was simple yet profound. Continuity isn't a checkbox, it's a living chain of accountability. Remove the anchor without proper handoff, and the chain severs, forcing a protective freeze to avoid illegal operations. I archived everything meticulously on encrypted private storage, logs of bypass clearances, redlined policies favoring efficiency over safety, credential sharing incidents via unsecured channels. One master document linked my employee identifier to the token registry, making reassignment a multi-agency process, not a quick HR swap. Colleagues sometimes joked about my paranoia, but I saw it as respect for the stakes, client data, market stability, our licenses. Over the years, I watched leadership cycles repeat, ambitious newcomers with slide decks promising disruption, cutting layers they deemed bureaucratic. Each time, I documented rather than debated. The anchor protocol evolved from those observations, designed to trigger only on verified absence, not complaints or performance reviews. It protected the firm from itself, ensuring that charisma couldn't override audited safeguards. Driving home that morning, these memories surfaced like old photographs. The coffee in my mug had gone cold as I replayed Vargas's flat dismissal. She viewed compliance as red tape slowing her full-spectrum alignment vision, new war room with glass walls, ambient music, standing desks, and glowing metrics she barely understood. Consultants raised polite questions about revalidation, but she brushed them aside with its handled. Meanwhile, the countdown advanced unnoticed. At 10 minutes post-departure, Internal sync queries began failing handshake with a token registry. Logging APIs queued for secondary confirmation. No one monitored the subtle yellow indicator I had placed in the corner of the main ops display, authority revalidation pending. It blinked every 10 seconds, designed to evade notice amid the applause and strategy sessions. By the time I reached my apartment and settled in, the first cascading effects were underway in the office towers downtown. Data timestamping entered pending states. External compliance feeds flagged anomalies without immediate panic. The protocols stretched like a safety net, tightening gradually. I felt no rush of vindication, only the quiet certainty of design meeting reality. Innovation without anchors leads to falls. I had seen it too many times. Sitting there, I pulled out the original contract from years back, flagged in key sections. It outlined the non-negotiable aspects of key person sovereignty. The system remembered even when humans forgot. As the clock ticked toward the 2-hour mark, I imagined the room's energy shifting from triumphant to uneasy. The consultant who had questioned regulatory syncs earlier might now be quietly researching. Others would refresh dashboards fruitlessly, attributing glitches to maintenance. This wasn't sabotage. It was fidelity to the rules we all claimed to follow. The firm had amputated its stabilizer expecting seamless function. But infrastructure has memory, and protocols enforce consequences where egos overlook them. The wind rattled my window, mirroring the internal fraying happening across the network. I waited, not for calls yet, but for the inevitable recognition that some absences speak louder than presence ever could. File 3. Downtown in the gleaming ops center. The atmosphere hummed with self-congratulation at first. Vargas stood on the raised platform, heels clicking as she gestured to the wall of monitors displaying upward trending arrows and green risk scores. "We've pivoted to the future," she declared, voice amplified slightly by the sound system. The new chief strategy officer clapped enthusiastically, joined by others eager to signal alignment. A young consultant raised a tentative hand. "Have we confirmed revalidation of the regulatory anchors post-transition?" The room's energy dipped momentarily. Legal team members exchanged glances before offering vague assurances about automation. Vargas smiled confidently. All handled in the transition plan. Unseen on the far monitor, the yellow box continued its steady blink. 57 minutes remained until full escrow initiation. The protocol didn't scream or lock screens abruptly. It began with gentle withdrawals. Sync processes paused for validation. Timestamp services flagged for review. External partner feeds noting anomalies in transmission headers. The control plane's heartbeat weakened against unverified authorization walls. At 46 minutes, dashboard metrics started flattening subtly. Refresh attempts yielded no change. A lieutenant tried restarting a terminal, but fallback routines recognized the verified absence and handed authority inward to hardened escrow shells. Cloud instances suspended gracefully into encrypted snapshots rather than crashing. VPN tunnels to auditors and federal liaisons closed with polite digital handshakes, archiving revocation proofs. The melodic chime sounded through every speaker at the 2-hour mark, not an alarm, but a neutral automated announcement. Continuity validation failed. Please contact authorized key person. Silence swallowed the room. Heads turned toward legal, then to Vargas, the new CTO. Recently poached from a troubled startup. Shifted uncomfortably. Someone voiced the obvious question: who holds the authorized key designation? Vargas remained silent because she hadn't inquired. She had assumed continuity titles were ceremonial, not active roles tied to cryptographic presence. The protocol enforced the truth. You can't dismiss the anchor and expect the vault to remain open. A console logged the final escalation. System halt authorized under Anchor Protocol. The main interfaces transitioned to Clinical Blue with center text. Operational authority unverified. Escrow mode engaged. Reinstatement requires key person validation. Panic built quietly at first, phones ringing from legal risk teams, compliance officers attempting workarounds, a federal liaison inquiring about failed sync checksums. No one had answers because the architecture demanded consent from the original anchor. Attempts to access the compliance vault showed dual authorization required, with only one valid name remaining active. Vargas stood frozen, processing beneath her composed facade. The realization dawned that the freeze stemmed not from malice, but from careful foresight. Rebuilding from scratch meant months of third-party audits, hardware recertifications, agency interviews, suspended licensing, and probationary contracts. Market perception would sour rapidly. Or they could acknowledge the overlooked binding. The General Counsel, arriving to assess, confirmed the severity privately. Phones escalated up the chain. No dramatic summons yet, but a quiet courier envelope was prepared requesting dialogue. Meanwhile, incomplete regulatory transmissions flagged themselves for review in government databases, promising inquiries soon. In my apartment, the first calls began around noon, but I let them go to voicemail. The structure had spoken. Now it awaited response. This pause prevented greater harm, rogue actions, or continued exposure. It was coordination, not chaos, a sterile enforcement of boundaries leadership had ignored. As the afternoon wore on, the building's monitors stayed dark except for the persistent message. Executives flipped through forgotten policy binders, realizing too late the cost of skipping institutional memory. By mid-afternoon, the full weight of the escrow mode pressed on the firm. Regulators had noticed the missed sync windows, prompting urgent inquiries from SEC and FDIC desks. Risk carriers demanded proof of control, threatening policy reviews. Internally, teams scrambled. IT attempted manual overrides but hit the hardened walls requiring original key consent. Legal drafted emergency memos citing the charter's 180-day rebuild timeline and associated risks. The board convened virtually. Voices strained over the implications: suspended operations, potential fines, reputational damage. Vargas's confidence eroded visibly in updates, her earlier bravado replaced by careful phrasing. The General Counsel advocated reaching out, emphasizing the protocol's non-negotiable design. A courier delivered the envelope to my door late afternoon, signed by the General Counsel. It requested a conversation without demanding return or issuing ultimatums. I arrived on foot, coat zipped against the biting wind, carrying only my original flagged contract. The General Counsel met me outside the main entrance, looking weary but resolved. She wasn't briefed on the anchor protocol, he admitted quietly. None of the new team fully grasped the bindings. I nodded without triumph. We walked the hushed halls together, monitors still displaying the escrow notice. No one made eye contact. The building itself seemed to hold its breath. Inside the ops center, Vargas stood by the frozen wall, posture tense. This has to resolve, she said evenly. Regulators are escalating. We've missed critical windows. I opened the contract to the relevant clauses, laying it flat. The language was clear. Escrow unlock required original key person approval or full rebuild with reviews. No shortcuts. Her breath caught as the gravity sank in. Rebuild meant massive disruption. Acknowledgement meant accepting the role's binding nature. The board gathered in the main conference room shortly after, suits rustling as they settled. I placed the prepared terms on the table. Direct board reporting line. Co-signature required on all infrastructure changes. 12-month restriction on unilateral overrides by operations leadership. Permanent active status for the anchor protocol. Quarterly audits under my supervision. The chair read in silence, then approved without debate or vote. Recognition, not punishment. The structure demanded respect. Vargas remained as operations lead, but under constraints. As others dispersed, the General Council lingered, noting the need to reauthorize the badge and vault. I sat across from Vargas later. She slid the badge across the table carefully now, understanding its weight. This will restore continuity. Her voice carried raw awareness. I confirmed, typing the validation sequence. The terminal chimed twice. Lights flickered subtly as dashboards revived. Metrics green again. Logs resuming. Yellow banners fading. The system breathed once more at 10:26 a.m. the next day. But the lessons lingered. She never issued infrastructure directives without review again. I didn't reclaim an old office, but maintained presence through the locked drawer housing the artifact. Some powers operate silently, enduring beyond titles or announcements. The firm stabilized, but the question remained, how often do we dismiss the quiet architects until the foundations shift? Reinstatement brought no fanfare. The network hummed back to life methodically. Syncs reconnected. External feeds validated. Reports flowing once more. But the atmosphere had transformed permanently. Executives now consulted the Anchor Protocol documentation proactively. Consultants who once dismissed safeguards pored over clauses. Vargas adjusted her approach. Routing changes through required channels. Her initial power play tempered by the memory of systemic silence. I operated from a modest setup. The continuity drawer my anchor point. The badge rested inactive until needed, its cryptographic presence ensuring legitimacy across jurisdictions. No gloating calls or posts. The design had proven itself without my intervention. Reflecting in the weeks that followed, the episode highlighted deeper truths about human systems. Ambition drives progress. Yet unchecked it severs vital links. Charisma inspires teams. But institutional memory safeguards them. We chase disruption, forgetting that true resilience lies in the embedded rules respected, not bypassed. The firm avoided major penalties through swift resolution, but the flagged regulatory anomalies prompted closer scrutiny for months. Clients remained, reassured by restored compliance. Yet whispers of the silent freeze circulated internally as cautionary lore. Vargas and I crossed paths occasionally in meetings. Her nods carried newfound respect, acknowledging the power in what she once dismissed as formality. Leadership, ultimately, isn't signing budgets or unveiling visions. It's knowing which unseen mechanisms sustain the whole and ensuring they're never taken for granted. As winter deepened over Chicago, I walked the same marble halls with quiet steps. The silence no longer felt ominous but balanced. The system had spoken its piece, restoring order through design rather than force. In the end, it asked an enduring question: when expertise builds the rails that guide us, do we honor them before the train derails? Or only after the tracks go cold? The answer shapes not just companies, but the fragile trust holding our interconnected world together.